It is an historic day in Washington, D.C., which is where Julie Kelly is. She was there for the Supreme Court arguments about whether or not Trump could be removed from the ballot in Colorado specifically, but also Maine then tried to follow in the wake of Colorado. It was a beatdown of epic proportions for those of you who listened to that argument or have heard some of the clips that we have played. So I'll start right here off the top, Julie. You were there, you watched it. If you had to predict what the Supreme Court is going to do here, what are the votes going to be in this particular case, having heard how it went, what would you predict?
I mean, I think anywhere from 7-2 to a 9-0 decision. And you can even see the long faces on MSNBC and CNN and look at the post by Andrew Weissman and others, and they seem to concede that this was a huge defeat for Colorado and their team, their defendants, and the Secretary of State there, because they were really obliterated by all of the justices, some more than others. But I think that it's pretty common knowledge now, or expectation is that the Supreme Court will reverse the Colorado Supreme Court. Again, it was only a 4-3 decision of all Democratic appointed judges, by the way. So this Section 314th Amendment controversy, or that latest attempt to remove Trump and others from the ballot, should be a done deal in terms of not being applicable, certainly to Donald Trump.
Julie, the arguments as you were hearing them, I mean, one thing that has already come up, they seem very sensitive over at MSNBC about whether this could be viewed in any way as a challenge to the notion of an insurrection in the first place. What do you make of that?
Well, there was some pushback. It not as much, of course, as I would have liked to hear the justices push back on the idea that this was indeed an insurrection. But there was doubt expressed as to the process and what the Colorado attorney, Murray, had to concede, and he was very confident in his argument, of course, but he said, look, this was a 5-day trial. Donald Trump had the opportunity to come and testify. He didn't. He really didn't defend himself. Well, no one was really taking that trial seriously. I mean, when you have Eric Swalwell as your star witness, right then and there, it should lose credibility. So you did hear justices, especially Amy Coney Barrett, express concern over Trump's due process rights being violated. And this, this judge, remember that the district judge did say, too, that, yes, she believed that Trump was involved in an insurrection, but she didn't believe that Section 314th Amendment applied. But what the justices pushed back on is, well, what was the evidence? And at one point, the attorney for Colorado said to Justice Alito, I believe, well, just go look at the record, because he said, well, what proof do you have of an insurrection? He said, well, go look at the record. And Alito said, what record? Because, of course, they just want you to look at the January 6th committee report and the videos that they produced and think that that was enough. So there was a little pushback, not as much as I would have liked, but this certainly will do some damage to the narrative that Trump incited this insurrection on January 6th.
Okay, we think, Julie, and this I know for a lot of people out there, it's hard to keep track on all this, and thank you for all the work you're doing keeping track on these cases. We think there are going to be 3 cases before the Supreme Court, probably relating to Trump in 2024. This one, which I agree with you, and I think Buck would agree as well, at worst 7-2, at best it would be 9-0, and I really do hope they get to 9-0. We've got the obstruction case, which I'm going to ask you to explain to people out there as well. And then Trump probably on Monday is going to appeal his presidential powers argument to the Supreme Court too. What do you expect? The next one up that we know for sure is the obstruction case, to see whether or not 2 of the charges that Jack Smith brought against Trump are going to be able to be tossed or valid or not. And then also the presidential powers case. Do you think the Supreme Court's going to take up presidential powers? How, if at all, do you think this ruling could impact the other 2 Supreme Court rulings?
Great question. So let's start with the immunity appellate ruling that came down this week upholding Judge Chutkin's order from December that said that presidents are indeed subject to criminal prosecution. The appellate panel came back 3-0 upholding that. That will now go to the Supreme Court. Now, they kind of gave Donald Trump an ultimatum, and they said, you need to file this application for an emergency stay before February 13th. Well, that requires 5 justices to agree to this emergency stay, which would basically put on hold the appellate ruling. If he doesn't, then he has to quickly expedite his to ask the full court to review the appellate court decision. That could take time. They could put that on an expedited schedule. We should know more, you guys, next week, how the Supreme Court responds to his application for the emergency stay on this appellate order. So that definitely will get to the Supreme Court, and it will, I believe, at some point, because Jack Smith said that in his own filing. You recall that he tried to skip over the appellate court, took that rare step of going right to the Supreme Court and asking them to resolve the immunity question quickly. They denied that. But now you're basically going to have both sides on record asking the Supreme Court to consider this. So I don't see a way that they don't do that. But to your point, a bigger concern for Jack Smith, aside from the immunity issue, has to be this 1512C2 obstruction of an official proceeding. This is a felony that's been slapped against more than 320 J6ers, half of Jack Smith's indictment, 4-count indictment against Donald Trump. The court already granted cert in that in December. And what that means is the court will probably in April hold oral arguments to determine whether this DOJ has appropriately interpreted and applied this post-Enron tampering with documents statute, which of course they haven't. So if the court, and we'll kind of know by oral arguments just like we did today which way they might head, if it sounds like a majority of the court is going to reverse how DOJ has interpreted that statute and applied it, that's going to spell big trouble for Jack Smith. So right now there's this collision course headed at the Supreme Court. We kind of know where the Colorado issue is going, but these are greater issues related to Trump's legal jeopardy and certainly the validity of Jack Smith's case in Washington.
Talking to Julie Kelly, Declassified is her Substack. Please subscribe if you want in-depth analysis and reporting on all these issues we're talking about here. Trump legal fight, J6 situation, and more. And Julie, at this stage, how confident are you in the belief, one way or the other, that Democrats recognize that they have messed up? Doesn't mean that it's over and they can't still get what they want. But Clay and I are looking at this, and given what's happened, whether it's the Atlanta prosecution with Fani Willis, looks like that's completely falling apart. Mm-hmm. The New York prosecution is so weak that it may actually do more political damage to Democrats to bring it, regardless of the outcome. The Florida judge doesn't seem like she's going to get this thing fast-tracked before the election, although that could change. And then you've got the J6 stuff and D.C. trial, which we're talking about. Do you think that they're desperate, or do you think that there's some sense that this is still going roughly according to their plan?
I mean, I think the Washington case, especially with the immunity appeal, and look, I feel more confident about the Supreme Court's decision on the 1512 matter than I do on immunity, unfortunately. So, and, you know, this court is still political, even though they seemed in solidarity today. They're going to have to split the baby somehow. They're not going to come out on Trump's side in the Colorado case and immunity and 1512C2. It's just not going to happen. So the question is what is decided which way. But to your point, definitely the Fani Willis indictment, that whole case is falling apart. Her credibility pretty much shot. The New York case, we don't even really hear anything about. And I'll tell you what happened in the Florida case this week, which I'm going to be writing about. Judge Aileen Cannon gave Jack Smith a major smackdown in court again. Basically saying he is attempting to keep under seal, protective orders under seal, information that should be made public. And so she filed an order this week saying that she is going to unseal information that Jack Smith has tried to steal, including, and I'm going to write about this weekend, you guys, a separate third investigation, FBI investigation, into Donald Trump. So this is aside from the classified documents one and aside from the J6 one. She is ordering now the defense, Trump's team who asked for it, she is going to permit that information to be unsealed, and also another person, individual, we don't know who, that DOJ considered indicting, and I'll have speculation on that as well. So we could have major bombshells coming out of the classified documents case because Aileen Cannon, unlike most judges, is not acting as a rubber stamp for DOJ and has denied a few times now Jack Smith's attempts to keep information under seal, not just from the public, but from Donald Trump and his co-defendants as well.
Okay, last question for you, Julie, and that potentially is going to be really fascinating in that classified documents case. So if we are right on timing roughly, right, and that obstruction case opinion is going to come out from the Supreme Court in late June, early July, do you think, and obviously this is a prediction question, do you think they want to open with the Alvin Bragg case and that one in New York City could be going in March? Or do you think the earliest we could see Trump on trial criminally is maybe late July, early August at the absolute best? How would you assess the timeline right now based on what we know?
All of it really depends on how the court handles the immunity issue. If they fast track a decision on immunity, presidential immunity, if they come back quicker on a decision with that, as opposed to 1512, if they uphold Judge Chutkan and the appellate panel and conclude that, yes, a president is subjected to criminal prosecution, that will restart the pretrial calendar in Washington. And depending on when that happens, the time that's elapsed between December, when Judge Chutkan put that on hold because of the immunity appeal, and any time that she has to make up there, that will restart the pretrial schedule. So it really depends on, everything hinges really right now, at least federal cases, on this immunity issue. I don't think anyone, including the Democrats, certainly Jack Smith, want Alvin Bragg to get the first bite here on a criminal trial. So we'll really know more next week how the court responds to Trump's application to stay. We should get a better sense of the timetable then.
Look at Julie Kelly's Declassified on Substack. And Julie, that's a real bombshell you just dropped here on the air, that there may have been another whole FBI investigation of Trump that we know nothing about so far. So you're going to dive into that, right?
Yes, I'm going to have something on my Substack this weekend that details what I suspect it was, who was involved, including the Department of Justice and possibly Joe Biden's general counsel, speculation on what the FBI investigation was about, and who I believe one of two individuals in Trump world that they were also looking to indict.
All right, Julie Kelly, everybody. Declassified on Substack. Go subscribe. Julie, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.